Motivation, preparation, and execution. Those are the three main components to getting good grades. And motivation sounds, I guess, like the easy part because it's like before the thing, but honestly, it is half the battle and it is not always easy getting motivated to study. I myself am really good at procrastinating, always have been, probably always will be, but hopefully not. I'm always like, oh, but I work really great under pressure. Yeah, I do, but preparing is always the best solution. And even though you might get an A by procrastinating and then cramming in all the work, you'll do better and you'll remember the thing better after the fact if you prepare. So, motivation. How do you get motivated to study? Obviously, there are sorts of motivations like, oh, I want to get into this school. I want my parents to be proud of me. Or, the classic tip like, oh, make studying fun. Do it with your friends. Make a game out of it. Take a shot every time something says America. Which sounds great, but not super realistic. And you can't do that every time. You'd be drunk all through high school, and that is not even legal. So, when I think about how to get motivated to study for a class, what I like to do is think, what can I personally gain out of this other than the good grade? Like, other than getting the end result. Why can this be useful to me? Biology, math, history, Norwegian, English, it doesn't necessarily ring as something that will be useful to you. But I promise you, you can see the usefulness in literally everything. I am not really good at math, and I think it's kind of boring because it's repetition. But I do want to be financially independent. I do want to be able to run a business and also just to function in my everyday life. Math is a big part of life. And even like small dumb things, like thought I would never use Roman numerals. I was like, that's the dumbest stuff ever. Why would they teach us that like in grade school? And now while studying history, I'm taking classes in ancient Greece and rhetoric. And a lot of the pages are in Roman numerals. And actually not even just in history, in like every academic text, usually the preface or preface or whatever is in Roman numerals. So it's actually kind of useful. Other things, obviously something that is known for being very dry is law. And sometimes you have to have laws like an elective or as a part of another elective like sociology, or if you're studying to work with children or people, often you have to take some type of classes in law when really you want to work with people and your like chosen field is health. Or if you want to run a business. And what I've actually seen in my life personally is that knowing the law, knowing how to read through legal documents, knowing the lingo, knowing where to look, because, law books are like this big. So knowing where to look, knowing how to look has been very helpful. Like, for example, when I was a couple years younger, when I was 18, I'm 20 now, 21 on Sunday. When I was 18, I found myself in a very bad work environment. I got the feeling like what was happening wasn't legal and my contract was very shady, and I was absolutely right. And luckily I knew some law, knew where the resources were, knew what to look up, knew my rights, and that turned out to be very helpful. Something that also is like, I think oftentimes when you have trouble studying, it might be because you're more of a practical person. Like, you want to go out, you want to talk to people, you want to do things, you don't want to read the text. And for example, if you want to be a marketer, then you might find analyzing Homer to be extremely boring. But what you gotta remember is that analyzing is about rhetoric, it's about text, it's about communication, and learning pathos, logos, and ethos might be boring, but really it's incredibly useful in marketing, it's useful in business, it's useful in dating, it's useful in job news, it's just useful in getting ahead in life. And I think many of these classes are actually extremely useful, maybe not in the way that we're taught, but knowing yourself, knowing your society, knowing the people around you, knowing how to play people, knowing the human's natural instincts, all of this can be very useful. I thought biology was just so incredibly nerdy. Never a friend who likes biology. It's like, why would you like biology? It's stupid. But then when I had sociology 101 or introduction to sociology, we actually had a lot of biology on the curriculum. And I found out that it was actually incredibly fascinating to see sort of how the human mind works, why it works the way it does, how us as apes and us forming a society actually like comes back to us dating in 2020. I don't know, I just thought it was incredibly fascinating. And that's the thing also, like one way to motivate yourself is by thinking of personal gain, like I said, getting good grades to get into the school you want, getting good grades to impress your parents, getting good grades for whatever reason, or to use the class for something in the future, which is my preferred method, because I always think about the future and I'm always like, oh, if I learn this, I can use that, and then blah, 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 blah. But also, one thing is to just actually open your eyes and be open for the possibility that what you're about to learn is actually exciting. I have many times been surprised because I've been like, oh, this is going to be so boring. And then it's actually super interesting. I remember I went to a modern economic history class with one of my friends who wants to be an accountant. I was like, fine, I'll go to the class with you to like keep you company, and then you'll come to my class. Turns out I actually loved that class. I ended up taking it and I got an A in it because I found it extremely fascinating. I just plowed through the books. Like, you never know what can actually be interesting. Like, if I hadn't had that friend who was going to take that class, then I would have never thought to take that, because as I said, I'm not a math person, so economics is like dull for me, although I find like economics as a concept interesting. But I was like, oh, numbers. But I went to the class, I was like, this is actually very cool. So you just gotta try new things, and you gotta try to stay open. Now that's the motivation part. Second part is preparation. This is what you do before the test, before your bachelor's, before the essay, before whatever. Now what you do right before the test or the essay or whatever is going to be a separate part, and that's going to be part of the execution, what you do when you're standing in front of the teacher holding a presentation, and what you do the minutes before and the day before. But first of all, consistency. So what do you do in the weeks, or at least hopefully days, before the thing you're going to be tested on? Our study really comes down to two different things. What is the best way for you personally to learn, and what is the best way to study this subject? Obviously, if you're going to study English and math, those are two very different things, because English is a language, it's about writing, it's about understanding, while math is more about technique, it's about memorizing, it's about really getting the formula down. And also, people learn differently. Obviously, we all know that in school we're supposed to learn the same way, and in Norway we have this kind of slogan like same school for everyone or something like that. And it's just people learn differently. Obviously, when you're a teacher, you got 40 students, you can't do things individually for every single student. But when you're at home, you can study however you want to. So if you learn more, or if you learn better audio visually than you do by reading. Then watch videos about the subject. And if you're studying a language, then watch movies in that language, and it helps. Obviously, you can't learn entire language just by watching movies, but it does help you connect the words in the book with the actual words that are said. If you're like me, for example, I'm, as I've said, not very good in math. I'm not a visual learner. So just seeing that blah 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 and the numbers, it doesn't really do it for me. What I like to do is to read up on how it is done. And also I found that once I went to like upper secondary school, we did a lot of computer math and we had a lot of graphs. And I was really confused because I was like, okay, we're doing these graphs, but in what situations would you use the graphs? What are the graphs for? I found it really difficult for me to remember each type of graph and each type of like sequence of things on the computer without knowing what it was for. Once I understood what it was for and actually got an answer from the teacher, made it a lot easier for me. And that's why I'm a person who does better with a subject like history, because everything has to do with each other. Like the Germans started World War II because of what happened after World War I. Like, it's logical. And for some people, math is extremely logical. And I know it is. I know, like, 1 plus 2 is 3. And that also means that 3 minus 1 is 2. But for me, making graphs without knowing what the graphs are for, what they mean, just isn't logical. So honestly, if you have any questions like that, if you know that you need to know something or do something a certain way to understand it better, to learn it better, then ask the teacher. Teachers are there to be asked, really. And they love it when you actually show some engagement, when you show willingness to learn their subject. Now, obviously, there are a lot of different ways to learn that can sort of like trigger the memory in our brain. For example, we know that it's easier to learn by writing by hand than on the computer. And I get that you can't always write by hand. Like, it's so much faster to write on the computer. It's easier to like keep the notes there. What I like to do is to maybe like write down the notes on your computer and then just write a small summary by hand. I've also found that for me personally, I'm in college, so I own the books that I use. So what I like to do is to mark out the most important sentences in the book. And sometimes that's like one sentence on one page, and sometimes it's like the entire page. But really, it just gives you that like extra step by noticing what's important. Because obviously when you read something, it goes into your brain. But when you read something, you have to filter through what's important. It's so much easier to remember it. And that's a promise. Really, it is super effective because A, you will remember it better. And B, when you're in the like final stage right before the test, like a couple of days before an exam or whatever, you can just go back and read only what's highlighted in the book. And that's one thing. Okay, we'll get to that later, but read both what you highlighted and the summary of the text. If your book has chapter summaries, read the summaries. Every single time. Before test, read the summary. If you're in high school, you have the books with you, just pull up your book and read the summary right before the text. I always did this because it's allowed. As long as you're still allowed to have up your book, just read the summary over and over again. I swear to God. Now, if you're in high school, you probably won't be the owner of the books you have. I know in my high school, we didn't own our own books. They were borrowed. And what I did, at least when I had an important exam, was that I would actually take the time to write in on my computer every single important note. Like, sometimes you have books that have the notes highlighted already, like from the manufacturer or from the author, obviously. So definitely write in that, and word explanations, write in that, because it's so easy to forget terminology when you're not used to using it. The more you write it down, the easier it will be to learn the terminology. And terminology is honestly a very important part of getting a good grade, especially when you have a presentation and when you're writing an essay. If you know the terminology, the teachers will automatically assume that you know the subject better. And it will make you sound more intelligent. And not only that, but it will actually help you speak more concisely on the subject. Because terminology is there for a reason. It's because it means something specific that isn't in everyday language. So learn the terminology. This is something that you should definitely be writing out by hand. And especially if you're taking a different language, like then obviously it isn't terminology, it's language. Write down words, because words are important. Now, as I was saying, sorry, that was a tangent. But on the computer, write down whatever is highlighted in the book, like terminology and like something that's highlighted or something that's like under, and always write in the summary. I personally took a lot of private exams when I went to high school, and for that we had two different types of exams, one written exam and one oral exam. Before the oral exam, we would always get the like what we were going to talk about half an hour before. It is gold to have good written out notes then, and not just handwritten notes, but computer notes as organized as you can get them. Because you just have to flip it up, find that subject, read everything you can about that subject in 15 minutes, and then write about that subject in 15 minutes. And having organized notes in a situation like that is just so helpful. Execution. Okay, so grades are something that you get in a lot of different situations for a lot of different things. Often you get a final grade based on every single little test and presentation you had, and like your participation in class and how well your teacher thinks you know the subject. While for example, in finals, you get one grade based on how you performed in that one single day. Now, obviously, you prepare for all these different things differently. First of all, I can say, because this also goes with preparation really, because it's consistent, is participating in class. If your teacher asks a question and you think you know the answer, raise up your hand. You might know the answer and you might not know the answer, but it is better to answer. I have many a times answered, and usually I get the answer right, and sometimes I'm completely off. Either way, the teachers appreciate that you're trying, and you actually do learn more by raising your hand to answer the question, because that makes you think about the question beforehand. I know that every time when I was in high school, my teacher would ask a question, it was like I was at a quiz and my mind would start racing to find the answer. That is really helpful. Not only does it prepare you for future tests and know what your teacher's priorities in the subject is, but it's also just a great like mini test for yourself. And it will play a big part in your final grade. If you're on the cusp of getting one grade and you've had a lot of participation in class, whether or not you were usually correct in your answer, that will give you a so much higher chance of actually going up a grade rather than staying down or going down a grade. It is super important. Now, before a test, as I said, read the summary, read your notes. Well, first of all, okay, what I like to do is study. And then right before the test, like an hour before the test, I just clear my head, no studying, like no, not even thinking about the test, just If I think about a test, I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna ace that. It's gonna be really good. Like it's gonna be great. I totally know everything. Doesn't matter if I know everything or not, or if I hardly know anything. You have worked so hard. You have written your notes. You have marked out everything in your book. You have read the chapter. You have watched the YouTube videos. You talked to your friends about it. Now is not the time to think about every single thing that might appear in your test. Now's the time to relax and be confident. And then, right before the test, if you're in a classroom situation where you're allowed to have your books up, read the summary. Just once or twice, just read the summary and be like, oh yeah, I knew that. So that it's just laid in your head, like all the important like dates, the names, the terminology, just so it's like a little reminder. And then you take the test. Let's say it's a 10 question test. If you get to question 1 and you don't know the question, move on to question 2. If you don't know question 2, move on to question 3. And then you get to question 3, you know it, write out everything, but not too much because you got to think of the time. Just do a small take. If you have 1 hour to finish test, obviously you can't spend 20 minutes on each question. That's a given. But write out what you know, and then often what you don't know will follow. For example, if question 3 is about, I don't know, it doesn't matter. What question 3 is about will often play into question 1. Or even if it doesn't, it will jog your memories. And not only will it often jog your memory because the things in the test are obviously related, but you will feel more confident and more at ease once you've answered a question correctly or answered a question. Oftentimes there will be 3 questions that you know better than the other 7 questions. Once you've answered those questions, you feel like, oh, I know what I'm talking about. I got this. And then your heart rate will go a little bit lower, you'll relax, and you'll be so much more able to actually remember what question 1 is, or what the answer for question 1 is. Now, a lot of good grades has to do with confidence, and that is both because confidence will make you feel more at ease, but also confidence will make it seem like you really know what you're talking about, even if you don't know it as well. I am a person that have a lot of knowledge. I also have a lot of confidence, and when I don't have all the knowledge, then my confidence definitely makes it seem like I have a lot more knowledge than I do. That is why I've always been good at presentations. And when I or you walk into a presentation or an oral exam, there's only one thing in your head, and that is, I've got this. I have got this. I've got this. It's in the bag. I know everything. I'm perfect. This is going to be great. This is just me showing what I know, because all of this, everything they're going to ask, everything I'm going to talk about, it is in my brain. Doesn't matter if it's true. You just have to feel like it is. You just have to breathe. Just breathe. It is so important. Whenever in doubt, in any situation really in life, just take some deep breaths and just think, okay, it's fine. I'm fine. Everything is as it should be. Really, that is the time to be both zen and energetic. You just got to be so calm with yourself. And then you just got to be confident and smile. Smiling is so incredibly important. Smile and shake everyone's hand. Smiling is incredibly important, and shake everyone's hand. If you're being examined by 3 people, then shake everyone's hand, look them in the eye, smile, and be like, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. And smile throughout your presentation. And if you stumble over your words, if you make a mistake, just smile again and be like, oh, that's not what I meant. And mistakes happen to everyone. It does not mean you're not an A student or B student, whatever you're going for. It does not mean you're not smart. Does not mean you don't know it. It means you made a mistake. Your teacher makes mistakes all the time. The key is to be confident and be like, oh, yeah, that is not what I meant to say, and just laugh it off, but not like long, but just be like, oh, I meant, and then say what you meant. Everyone makes mistakes. It is not going to affect your grade. Not if you stumble over a word or just accidentally say the wrong year. As long as you correct your mistakes, that's what's most important. And this is also why we study and why we especially study the terminology, to be more confident in what we're talking about. If you're holding a presentation in sociology and you don't know the sociology terminology, then what you're saying is going to sound vague, unconfident, and unacademic. If you know the terminology, it's going to sound like you studied, it's going to sound like you actually care, and overall you're going to sound more confident, and you're going to make others feel like they're actually listening to a presentation in sociology. As I said before, terminology is there because we need more specific words than the common language can express. A key to being confident is to know your stuff and to know how you work in a situation. If you're someone who sounds like a robot, if you're talking off a script, then don't talk off a script. If you're someone who will definitely not remember anything, if you don't have a script, then have a script. You really have to know yourself and know how you work. Oftentimes, key points are well enough. It really also depends on how you remember things. And this probably sounds like dumb, but with a test, if you're writing it by hand, have a pen that makes you feel comfortable. Have like a cute eraser if that's what you like. Just make yourself feel at home taking the test. I always have to have like the best pens that make me feel like, oh yeah, this is a good pen to write with. I don't want to be panicking about ink not coming out when I'm writing, or about it being like I have to push it down so hard it's ruining the paper. Like, I want to feel at ease. I want to just be able to do whatever. And it's also nice to like have something that makes you feel at home. Like, I always have Coke Zero on my exam, so I'm like, oh yeah, I am Zoe Roberts, and that's that's super unhealthy, but that makes me feel a lot better. Also, when it comes to confidence and nerves, I know that a lot of people especially worry about presentations because maybe you have some social anxiety, or maybe you just are afraid of what people will think of you, the people will think you're dumb, or that what you're saying is lame, or whatever. All these types of thoughts that just pop into our heads as a part of our insecurities. And what is really important to remember, and that is just, it is not something I'm saying, it is 100% true, is that literally nobody in the room except for your teacher is paying any negative attention to your presentation. Usually everyone's just worried about their own presentation, and if they're not, they're honestly just so glad that they're not the one that's up there. No one is judging you because everyone thinks they're the worst at holding presentations. Everyone's like, oh, what I'm saying isn't as good as what he's saying and she's saying, or she knows terminology better and she's more relaxed, or he seems to really have a grasp of the history of this. No one's like, oh my god, she looks so stupid doing that. Nobody cares. And your teacher is only trying to see what you've learned. So just show that you learned, that you paid attention, that you're interested, that you're relaxed, that you're having fun. And don't worry about being perfect, because not a single person in that room is perfect at holding a presentation. And exactly this, it's like when you go to school, you're learning something new every single week. You do not have years of training and specializing in this one particular subject. No one there does, except for your teacher. So no one is judging you, and I can promise you that. Literally, don't even think about that, and just block those people out. Just look around the room, but don't see particular people. Just have stage presence. Just be like, don't be like, oh, that person. Just look like they're objects. Can I say that? Like they're objects. Your teacher is the person you need to be worried about. Look your teacher in the eyes and smile. And look like you're having fun. Look like you know what you're talking about. And this is why we are prepared, so that we know what we're talking about, because it really helps to actually know what you're talking about. And just spew out some facts, spew out some terminology. If you forget what you're going to say, just go on some tangent about something. Just learn something extra so that you always have something to fill the time if you forget what you're supposed to say. But also remember, and this is something that I personally am very bad at, to stay within the time allotted. So if your presentation is supposed to last 5 to 10 minutes, then don't have it last longer than 11. I remember once in the 8th grade, I was supposed to hold an 8-minute presentation about Ted Bundy in English, and I ended up talking for 28 minutes. And that's what happens when you don't pay attention, when you don't have a script, when you don't rehearse at all, and when you find the subject too interesting and you're too much of a nerd. And luckily, because that was our first year having grades, because in Norway we start grades in the 8th grade, my teachers still gave me an A, because my presentation was obviously very thorough and well presented, and people actually found it interesting. But he was like, dude, if this was next year, you would not have gotten an A. You're not supposed to do that, Zoe. And now in college, I really, really make sure that my essays are not longer than they're supposed to be. Because now usually we get, our grade is only based on the exam, but we get pass or don't pass on the assignments. And if it says no more than 2,000 words, then no more than 2,000 words, because you might flunk because of that. So that is something that I personally have had to improve a lot. And that's also another thing with getting good grades. It's knowing your strengths and weaknesses, play on your strengths, and work on your weaknesses. My weakness is being more structured, and that is something I've worked systematically on for years and I'm getting better at. And for some, their weakness is that they have a harder time talking in front of people. If you do that, honestly, the cure is to talk more in front of people. And talk to people more in general. Be more social. Take the word more in group settings. Say something in every single meeting. Maybe take up a hobby that involves some public speaking, like if you want to be a camp leader, or some performance like being in the choir. Like if something is hard for you, then that's what you got to work on. If sitting down and reading an entire book is hard for you, then you got to start reading more, because obviously we all learn in different ways, and it can be super useful to watch videos or movies or documentaries, but oftentimes we have a curriculum and there's stuff that you have to read, and you got to make sure that you are able to keep your concentration and read that, and also remember it or like process it in some way, whether that's taking hand notes, taking notes on the computer, or marking like I do, or making especially notes of the terminology or the dates, or making timelines, drawings, or like tongue-cut thought maps. Is that what they're in English? I don't know. No matter what, like there are things that you will have to do, and honestly, you just have to do the work on that. Like I had to work on my math, and I had to work on actually participating a little bit in gym and being more structured. And obviously, that's what's hard. But you got to work with yourself, not against yourself. So you got to try as hard as you can to make things fit with who you are as a person and how you learn. I hope that this was useful in any way. I personally think that it was. It's based on real life experience. From both tips I have used myself and tips I have given my friends and others that I've helped to study to get better grades. And basically, the summary is just motivate yourself, prepare, and execute with confidence. And be yourself and work with yourself, not against yourself. Play on your strengths and work on your weaknesses. That is all. I hope I'll see you next time. Bye.